everyone, it's Bea. Today I'm here to talk about Lisa Garland from Silent Hill 1, a game that's been analyzed probably just as many times as Resident Evil 4, if not more, and so doesn't need as lengthy of an introduction as some of the more obscure titles I've covered in this series so far. However, that does not mean that we can skip over the whole plot summary portion, because without some context, nothing that I'm going to say is going to make any sense, especially if it's been a while since you've played Silent Hill 1 or watched somebody else play it. So first we're going to talk about the general plot summary, which is really short, don't worry, and then we're going to go over all the scenes that Lisa herself is in, so you have some context for when I start talking about Lisa as a character. So, with that being said, if you want to go grab yourself some coffee or a snack or something, now would probably be a good time because, as per the usual, the plot summary portion always takes the longest. And just to get it out of the way before we get too far into it, it's content warning time! In today's video, I will be discussing addiction, workplace abuse, and domestic violence. So if those topics are going to be especially difficult or upsetting for you to listen to, just please remember to put your mental health first and don't feel obligated to continue watching if you're uncomfortable with the content of the video. I don't want anyone to feel like they need to sacrifice their mental health for the sake of watching my silly little video. So, with that being said, let's take a trip to the sleepy little resort town of Silent Hill. To super briefly introduce the game, Silent Hill was released by Konami for the PlayStation 1 in 1999 and created by the beloved Team Silent, a development team within Konami that was formed to produce a game that could compete with the increasingly popular Resident Evil survival horror franchise and went on to make the first 4 Silent Hill games, which are coincidentally the best 4 Silent Hill games. In this game, we play as Harry Mason, a father taking his daughter to the quaint little resort town of Silent Hill, which in recent years has gotten itself quite the reputation for more than just a few strange occurrences taking place there. As Harry and his daughter Cheryl pull into the town, a car accident caused by the sudden apparition of a figure of a young girl in the road ends in the father and daughter being separated. The rest of the game is spent playing as Harry, exploring the deserted and foggy town of Silent Hill in search of his daughter, fending off monsters and uncovering the town's malevolent secrets of cults, rituals, and sacrifices along the way. Now that we have the general plot summary part out of the way, which I can luckily cover pretty quickly since Lisa isn't the main character of this game unlike some of the other women I've covered in this series so far, now we're going to talk about all of the scenes that Lisa herself is in and how she interacts with other people so we can get a better idea of what she's like as a person. So, with that being said, let's explore Silent Hill's Alchemilla Hospital. Alchemilla Hospital, which was the oldest hospital in Silent Hill, was intended for the treatment of both physical and mental health. The hospital's basement was home to Alessa, the young girl whose appearance in the road caused the car crash that separated Harry from his daughter at the beginning of the game. I'm not going to go too far into it in this video since the explanation of Alessa and her backstory is incredibly convoluted and stretches over several games in the franchise, but just to give you an idea, Alessa, daughter of the town's cult leader named Dahlia, a woman who Harry has many run-ins with throughout the game and serves as the primary antagonist of Silent Hill 1, was used as a sacrifice by her mother in a ritual attempt to resurrect God. During this ritual, Alessa was set on fire, sustaining what should have been fatal burns, but by some force of magic, she remained alive and kept bedridden in the basement of the hospital for 7 years following the incident. While being kept there, no one knew she was alive other than her own mother, who continued inflicting a pain upon her, blaming her for the ritual's failure, a few other cult members, and one young nurse who cared for her in the years she remained in the basement, Lisa. The Alchemilla Hospital in Silent Hill 1 is dark. The walls are covered with the color of rust, a clear indication of its location in the otherworld. The halls are overrun with homicidal doctors and nurses that run towards you, their backs hunched and knives in hand. These definitely aren't the sexy nurses you probably think of when you think of Silent Hill. Within the walls of the hospital, we find a room that seems as though someone's been in it pretty recently. Next to the bloodstained bed, there is a framed photograph of the same young girl that was standing in the road at the beginning of the game, labeled Alessa, next to a golden key. This would imply that we're standing in the room Alessa was kept bedridden in for the 7 years following the failed ritual. Further into the hospital, and we finally find the room that our key needs to be used for, the examination room. Upon opening the door, we see a nurse, not a zombified one, but a real flesh and blood nurse crouched under a table, clearly afraid. We point our flashlight at her, and as soon as she realizes that we're a real person, she wordlessly runs up to Harry and hugs him, smiling at him. The two get to talking and Lisa says finally someone else who's okay, and they introduce themselves. Lisa seems to be entirely clueless about what's happening in the hospital and likely the rest of the town as well. She asks what's happening and where everyone is and claims that she must have gotten knocked out because when she came to, everyone was gone. Harry seems a little frustrated that she doesn't have any information for him, but they both agree that they must be living in some sort of nightmare. Harry inquires with Lisa about his daughter Cheryl and gives a description of her. Lisa asks if it's his daughter and repeats a 7-year-old girl to herself. It says she's sorry, but she doesn't know because she was unconscious the whole time. Harry tries to ask if she knows anything about the weird stuff he found in the basement. She just says no. Why? Is there something down there? He confides that hospital staff are under strict orders to never enter the basement storeroom, so she has no way of knowing what's down there. She asks Harry what exactly he said was down there, but as he tries to respond, he begins having a terrible headache and Lisa attempts to help him. When he wakes up, he's in a hospital bed located within the normal hospital, not the Otherworld hospital, and Lisa is gone. He wonders if he's dreaming. Later on, Harry finds an altar hidden within a narrow stone passageway. He inspects it and walks away, but as he turns, he notices that the altar is now on fire. Seemingly, this fire has somehow teleported him back to the Otherworld version of the hospital, and he now sits directly across from Lisa, wondering where he is. Lisa said he was having a bad dream. During this cutscene, Lisa appears to be very out of focus, and Harry says, "Hey, you don't look too good, are you okay?" But she just says she's fine, and it's nothing he needs to worry about. Harry then asks Lisa about Dahlia, Alessa's mother and the leader of the town's cult. Lisa calls her the crazy Gillespie lady, Gillespie being her last name, and mentions that she's pretty much famous in the town of Silent Hill, but she never sees anybody, so she doesn't know much about her. She says that she heard that her kid died in a fire and she's been crazy ever since, which is so close, but so far from the truth. And Harry asks her if she knows anything about Dahlia's claim that the town is being devoured by darkness, and she begins recounting to Harry that before Silent Hill became a resort town, it was a relatively quiet place with relatively quiet people, and that everyone followed some sort of alternative religion, the kind involving magic and the occult. She says that as young people began moving away, the townspeople figured that they had been summoned by the gods, and that things like that used to happen all the time, so they just wanted someone to blame it on. As new people began coming to town, the townspeople became much more secretive, and it's been years since she's actually really heard anything about it. But she does recall hearing that when a bunch of land developers came to town, they started dying under accidental circumstances, something which the townspeople believed to be the result of a curse. Lisa then stops and says, "I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I'll shut up," and appears somber as she looks down at her lap. After this, Harry wakes up on the ground somewhere else and wonders again if this interaction with her was a dream. Harry wonders to himself if all of this is just going on in his head while he's lying unconscious in a hospital bed after his car crash, but he's not even sure what's real. He then wonders how to get to the lake since that's where he thinks that Cheryl is gone, but since he doesn't know how to get there, he thinks to himself that Lisa would probably know. After fighting our way through the town once again, Harry finds himself making his way back to the hospital, and we find Lisa there, of course, since she doesn't appear to go anywhere else. Lisa seems very excited to see us and runs up to Harry, grabbing his hands with hers. She says, "Thank God you came back. I was scared to be here all alone." Harry says he's glad that she's okay, but he's here now, and that he was worried about her too, but he's really happy to see her. He asks her how to get to the lake, but unfortunately her directions don't help much since the only road there is blocked. Lisa suddenly remembers that there's an abandoned waterworks by her old elementary school that has an underground tunnel beneath it that should lead all the way to the lake. She says she's not 100% sure, seeing that she's never been down there herself, not to mention it's fenced off, but Harry says if there's even a chance that he has to try. Lisa gets upset, begging Harry not to go because she doesn't want to be alone again because it's so scary she can't stand it. Harry tries to ask Lisa to come with him, promising that he'll do his best to protect her, but she says no because somehow she feels that she's not supposed to leave this place, then says that she's so scared and cold. Lisa crosses her arms across her chest and begins walking away from Harry as he leaves to go and find his daughter. Lisa just pauses in the middle of the room, holding her arms close and looking down at the floor. After a long while of fighting monsters and exploring more of the town, Harry has an encounter with Alessa and her mother, Dahlia, after she has recaptured her daughter, preparing her to attempt the ritual yet again. Dahlia uses some form of magic on Alessa that causes a bright light to form around them and disorients Harry. He wakes back up on the floor of the hospital, face to face with Lisa as she hovers above him. He sits up suddenly and Lisa looks different. Her eyes wide with a blank stare, her face begins to twitch as she looks down at him. Then again, as usual, they sit across from each other, Harry on the edge of the hospital bed and Lisa in a chair. Harry asks her where Alessa and Dahlia went, but she cuts him off and says that something he said before has been bothering her. She says that while he was gone, she went to look in the basement even though she was scared, and there she had a weird feeling like she had been there before. Like something happened there that she can't quite remember somehow. She asks for Harry's help to remember because she's so scared she can't take it and begins shaking her head, holding it between her hands. Harry says it's just a temporary thing because she must be in shock from when she was knocked out and she shouldn't fret about it. Harry reaches out to lay his hand on Lisa's arm to comfort her, but she suddenly jolts out of her seat, fists by her sides, and says, "No, you don't understand," and turns to leave. We then find Lisa standing in what looks like a storage room next to the morgue in the basement of the hospital. Harry asks Lisa what's the matter with her, and she says that she gets it now, why she's still alive even though everyone else is dead. She's not the only one who's still walking around, she's the same as them, she just hasn't noticed before. By them, I assume she means the undead nurses that haunt the halls and corridors of the Otherworld's hospital. On the verge of tears, she asks Harry to please stay by her and to help her, save her from them. She begins walking towards Harry, arms stretched in his direction, seeking comfort from him, but Harry begins backing away from her, eventually even pushing her away as she begins to cry. We then get what is probably the most iconic cutscene from the Silent Hill franchise, which I will let play in its entirety, and then we'll talk about it after.
Lisa?
During this cutscene, we see Lisa, her eyes gone completely black with a dead expression. Blood begins trailing from her head, through her eye, and down her neck. She pushes herself off the wall and stumbles toward Harry, blood now streaking across her entire face and from seemingly every direction. She looks distraught, her eyebrows pinched tightly in the center of her forehead as she becomes drenched with her own blood, staining her dress and painting her face red. The whites of her eyes disappear completely, and Harry runs from her, shutting her behind a door. We hear Lisa cry behind the door as we block it so she can't get out, and when we re-enter the room, we find a diary on the floor. Lisa's diary reads as follows. Asked doctor to let me quit being in charge of that patient. It's too weird. Still alive with wounds that won't heal. Told the doctor I quit. Won't work at that hospital anymore. The room is filled with insects. Even with doors and windows shut, they get in to spite me. To the hospital. Feeling bad. Need to throw up, but nothing comes out. Vomiting only bile. Blood and pus flow from the bathroom faucet. I try to stop it, but it won't turn off. Need drug. Help me. I'm sure that was probably super confusing, so now is probably a good time to introduce the doctor Lisa was talking about, Dr. Kaufman. Dr. Kaufman, the man whom Lisa was working under at the hospital, secretly ran the town's drug trade and had connections to the cult, which is how Alessa was able to be kept in the basement of the hospital all those years. Lisa was beginning to catch on to Dr. Kaufman's shady business dealings when he started administering drugs to Lisa, effectively causing her to develop an addiction, and then he used said addiction as blackmail to keep Lisa working with Alessa in the basement of the hospital despite her protests, and to keep her mouth shut about his business dealings. Lisa's drug dependency increased throughout the 7 years she spent working with Alessa, and her physical and mental health began to deteriorate as she began experiencing hallucinations of insects and becoming increasingly neurotic. Lisa's boyfriend Matthew makes an attempt to rescue her from one of the cult's deities during the town's initial descent into the nightmare realm it is now, but he failed, losing his own life and Lisa's. Now is as good a time as any to tell you that Lisa, as we see her in the first Silent Hill game, is dead. However, she has no recollection of dying and so couldn't move on until she remembered why exactly she was there in the first place. Her discovery of what the basement was used for and the experiences she had there treating Alessa, the girl who would never heal, caused Lisa to finally move on and for her spirit to be released from the otherworld. The patient Lisa is referring to in her diary is Alessa herself, obviously. The repressed memory that she finally retrieved after visiting the basement was that she was the nurse who cared for her while she was kept down there. Later on, we find a VHS tape of Lisa describing Alessa's condition. I'm going to play that whole clip for you as well.
What is it? Still has an unusually high fever. Eyes don't open. Getting a pulse, but just barely breathing. Her skin is all charred. Even when I change the bandages, the blood and pus just start oozing through. Why? What is keeping that child alive? I can't stand it any longer. I won't tell a soul. Promise. So please.
Lisa sounds desperate for answers, and more importantly, desperate to be freed from having to take care of Alessa, since the seemingly supernatural girl never gets better with no explanation, which scares Lisa terribly. This is not the last we see of Lisa, though. At the very end of the game, after Harry defeats the god birthed from the ritual Alessa was forced to carry out by her mother, Lisa, still covered with blood, crawls her way up onto the middle platform through a hole in the floor, and runs toward Dr. Kaufman, grabbing him and dragging them both back into the hole in the ground. The implication being here that she has finally gotten her revenge on Dr. Kaufman and likely killed him for the years of blackmail and abuse that he put her through. Now that we're done summarizing Lisa's role in Silent Hill 1, I think it's about time we talk about Lisa as a character. Lisa Garland at the time of Silent Hill 1 is 23 years old, less than a year older than me. Lisa was a woman who dreamed of being an actress but had her dreams dashed and settled on a career in nursing instead. But nursing ended up being a pretty good fit for her since she's clearly shown to have a good heart. Heather Mason, daughter of Harry Mason, who just so happens to be Alessa reincarnated, which is something that's way too complicated to explain in too much detail in this video, recalls in Silent Hill 3 her time spent with Lisa acting as her caretaker in the basement of Alchemilla Hospital. Heather says, "But that nurse, I know her. Lisa, she was so heavenly toward me in that hellish hospital room. She did get a little weird though." This line points to a few things for me. That initially Lisa accepted the challenge of caring for Alessa despite the dingy location and her beyond critical condition and treated her with the utmost care and sympathy. However, sometimes being an empathetic person can allow others to take advantage of that, like Dr. Kaufman, who kept Lisa under his thumb, drugged into submission for years to keep her working on Alessa, despite the fact that the circumstances under which Alessa was being kept alive with wounds that never healed seemed obviously wrong and nefarious. I think some can make the argument that since Lisa never told anyone about what was going on inside of the hospital, that she could be considered a morally gray person. But I don't really think that's the case, because she was working under abusive and potentially dangerous conditions if she were to mess with the wrong person or make an attempt to alert the authorities. I think her choice not to tell anyone about Alessa and the doctor's drug dealings or business associations with the town's cult simply boils down to her being too afraid of what might happen to her if she did. And I think that's an understandable reason, even if Alessa suffered because of it. But I do think that's a matter of opinion, whether or not you feel like Lisa should have done more to help Alessa, or if you think it's reasonable why she wouldn't want to. Despite Lisa's struggle with addiction and eventual plea to be released from under the thumb of both Dr. Kaufman and the town's cult, and from being forced to care for Alessa, I don't think Lisa ever truly lost her empathy and her kind nature. Though she was, by the end of her life, literally losing her mind, having increasingly frequent hallucinations and becoming incredibly ill from her drug dependency, it's clear that she was just afraid, and justifiably so, knowing that she was working under such sinister people. And I'm sure that having to treat Alessa was probably like Groundhog Day. Every day you go into work and you treat this girl's near-fatal wounds every single day, and you intensively have to take care of her because she's in critical condition. But it's been 7 years, nothing's ever changed. I'm sure that's probably maddening to know that nothing you do is going to make a difference because this girl is still going to be in the same condition every single day, no matter how much time goes by. I don't think the problem was that she didn't want to care for Alessa anymore. I think she just wanted an end to it, because if this person is constantly in critical condition and nothing you're doing is helping, I'm sure that's probably very upsetting. Even in her death, as she struggles to regain her memories, she begs Harry on multiple occasions to stay with her and tells him that she's scared. The fact that even though she doesn't know him at all, when she sees Harry for the first time and realizes that he's a real human being, she is so overcome with relief she rushes up to him and hugs him, and in the subsequent meetings with Harry, they become much closer. She holds his hands excitedly when she sees him and tells him that she was worried about him. It's almost pitiful to watch because Lisa seems like such a sweet woman, and to know how terribly she was treated at the end of her life, I just can't imagine how someone could do that to her. And I'm sure she probably also didn't get much social interaction in her years working with Les in the basement because nobody else knew that there was even a patient down there. I'm sure she probably didn't get to see any of her coworkers or anyone, especially with how much care Lessa required. She probably didn't get much time to herself. During one of Harry's conversations with Lisa that I mentioned earlier, she recounts to him the history of the town and cuts herself off to say, "I'm sorry I'm rambling, I'll shut up," and looks down at her lap, not saying another word. This, to me, is an indication that Lisa must be used to having what she says ignored or swept under the rug or feeling like she's an inconvenience to the people around her, which makes sense given that one of the primary men in her life had been abusing her for years, physically, mentally, and it's even implied that he abused her sexually as well in one of the limited release comics made about the Silent Hill series. Kaufman had kept Lisa dependent on him through drugging her, and through this dependency, Lisa also began to lose her agency, her self-esteem, and her identity. I think that knowing all of this about Lisa's past and her own descent into madness coinciding with the town's and her eventual death and curse to roam the halls of the Otherworld's Alchemilla hospital makes the scene of her spirit finally being released somewhat bittersweet. Though it's heartbreaking to see her stumble, helpless to escape her fate, bleeding and crying, searching for comfort from Harry, a man that she barely even knows, just so she won't have to be alone during this terrifying final transition, I can't help but be glad that she can finally move on from Alchemilla, a place that holds so many years of trauma and pain for her. I'm glad that she can finally escape her own personal hell, something I'm sure Alessa was also hoping to be released from during those 7 years that they spent in that horrible basement together. They were both suffering, just in different ways. I'm immensely glad that Lisa was finally able to get her revenge at the end of the game as well. Oftentimes in movies, stories, or games, women who are abused just turn the other cheek, they forgive and forget, and they move on, because they're the bigger person. But truth be told, sometimes endings like that just aren't realistic or satisfying. Being mistreated for years and years isn't something you can just forget. Those years and experiences will stay with you for life. And though it can be good to be the bigger person when someone wrongs you, at some point that ending just won't give you the closure you need. It's not an ending that's satisfying for anyone other than the abuser who just got off scot-free with not even so much as a slap on the wrist for the terror that they just inflicted on another person for literal years. I know that revenge isn't the best outcome a lot of time, or isn't even an option because it could put the victim in even more danger, but in Lisa's case, now that she is truly dead and has nothing to lose, I'm happy she finally gave Dr. Kaufman a taste of his own medicine. He sure as hell deserved it. Pun intended. All in all, I think Lisa's character is just beyond tragic. When I think about the fact that Lisa is not even a whole year older than me since I'll be 23 next month, and she's already been subjected to so much pain and abuse throughout her incredibly short life, just breaks my heart. I remember watching the cutscene of Lisa's death, which isn't really a death since she's already dead, for the first time when I was about 13 years old. It made me cry then, and almost 10 years later, I still tear up when I watch it. It's even sadder now that I'm almost the same age as her, because when you're young, you think 23 is so old, but when you actually get there, you realize how short of a time it actually is. Though the town's destruction was what eventually led to Lisa's death, we both know that she was already on her way there, as her mind and body became sicker and sicker through Dr. Kaufman's abuse of power that he exacted over her. In the beginning of the game, there's even a scene where Dr. Kaufman runs up behind Lisa and forcefully grabs her arm, kind of hinting to all of this before we actually find out what happened. But Lisa's situation may not be as far from the reality of things as we'd probably like to hope. In the real world, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 20,050 workers in the private industry experienced trauma from non-fatal workplace violence in 2020. Of that 20,050, 73% were female and 76 worked in the healthcare and social assistance industry. If those statistics don't make you feel sick to your stomach, they should. I think the thing that really sticks with me about Lisa is that despite her traumatic and tumultuous past, at the end of the day, she's still just as caring of a person or ghost. And it seems to me like she just really needs someone who's going to care for her, because it doesn't seem like that's something that she ever really had. Her story is unbelievably tragic in every way, but I think the worst of it all is that it's not really all that unbelievable, is it? Well, besides the whole resurrection of cult deities and otherworld stuff and all that nonsense. I really do wish we could have found out more about Lisa as a person. Not just her life inside of the workplace, but her interests, her hobbies, just to be able to see her at her best instead of at her worst. I'm sure she was lovely. Anywho, just a quick announcement. This is going to be my last video for spooky season since I won't have time to make another one before the end of the month, but that doesn't mean that the Woman of Survival Horror series is over, so don't worry. I still have plenty of other fun videos in store in the future and more women that I'd like to cover in my series. And as always, I'd like to thank you all for watching. I hope you all have a good day or night or whatever time it is wherever you are, and I will see you all next time.